Hey guys, Yasin here from the Fantasy Life app, here with another week spent with Byron Lambert of Rosterwatch. We are going to be answering as many questions as possible as we do every week. We will be answering questions throughout as we're breaking down every matchup this week as well. And if we don't get to your question in the beginning, we will absolutely try to hit as many questions as possible towards the end. We always do a 10 to 15 minute blitz of questions that we're answering. All right, so news just came out. Deandre Swift, I don't know that anybody was expecting him to play, but Matt Patricia was asked if the stages of concussion protocol will give Swift enough time to clear before Sunday. Quote, it makes it difficult. So let's talk about Detroit, Byron. What do you have? What are your expectations for this Detroit backfield and their matchup this week?
Well, of course, Yasin, we never like injury news, and Deandre Swift is beginning to look like the absolute stud in that offense that he was drafted to be. But this is great news on the fantasy side for teams that are maybe on that playoff bubble, making this late push, that are scrounging around for a flex play, because now all of a sudden guys like Adrian Peterson, most notably, and potentially even Kerryon Johnson behind him, who's available on most waiver wires out there, come into focus as waiver wire plays this week that possibly have significant upside. If you see what Ronald Jones did in this matchup last week, really feels like if Adrian Peterson gets that kind of volume, he could have a big game here. But you know, it could go to either of those running backs. We've seen this time and time again against this Panthers defense, which really was a total sieve versus the fantasy running back at the outset of the season. They've stiffened up a little bit, but still, this is a great matchup, most notably for Adrian Peterson, but possibly even for Kerryon Johnson if you're in a pinch. And Deandre Swift does not go. Both those guys make for good stopgap plays this week, Yasin.
Now, I'm more excited about Adrian Peterson. Are you more excited with one over the other? Because I just cannot bring myself to start Kerryon at all. So look, I'm rostering AP. And I would actually consider rolling him out in flex. I think he's been looking pretty good. I know he's been losing the lead role, obviously, to Swift, but with Swift out, I expect AP to get some good looks.
Exactly. I mean, this was a real twist to serendipity for Adrian Peterson owners, Yasin. He is the guy that comes most into focus here that we would all expect to take this lead role. And very much, like I said, I mean, he could do a lot of what a player like a Ronald Jones did last week. I don't think he can break the 98-yarder, but he can get all of those yards between the tackles. And with that kind of volume, man, I really do expect Peterson could have a big game. But we do want to just mention that this has basically been a committee. And when you're able to kind of take one guy out of the mix, all of a sudden, I think in a matchup like this, there could be room for two guys to perform, or it could be a situation where it could be a hot hand and you never know what might manifest. So again, yes, we're on the same page. Adrian Peterson is the player you're very excited about, sans Deandre Swift this week, but I think it gives a little daylight to a Kerryon Johnson play for owners that are in a tough situation.
Yeah. All right. So with this Swift concussion, it looks like Adrian Peterson is the better play. Kerryon Johnson, if you're really in a pinch, I think that might make Kerryon a decent DFS option. Now, let's also talk about Carolina, who they're playing this week. With Carolina, Detroit, what should we expect out of this defense, and how might that change the game plan for Detroit overall?
Well, it's interesting. The over-under, the projected game total in this one is a little bit lower than I might have expected, Yasin. Let's see here. It's a 45.5 point projected game total on the sports books here. So really one of the very slowest slogs of a game projected by the way the bets are coming in right now. If you look at this one from the Carolina defensive perspective, this is the best matchup. It's the best matchup for the Lions running backs. If you're trying to look at the Carolina's defense in terms of fantasy, that's really where we're going to be most interested. I think it's a place where Hawkinson can certainly continue to produce. And then when we look at the other side, for the Panthers side, this is an excellent matchup for Mike Davis. It's the number one matchup in all of fantasy. We saw Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissic both produce last week in this very same matchup. It looks like we'll be without Christian McCaffrey. And, I think we saw last week, Mike Davis is the kind of player that can He can leave you high and dry in any given week, but I think you got to go back to him here, Yasin, and you got to feel pretty good about it. It's also a decent matchup for the quarterback. I'm assuming, I would like to see the latest news here. I know Teddy Bridgewater was a little banged up earlier in the week, but sounds like he was probably going to go, and it's a solid matchup for Bridgewater, who has kind of been playing musical chairs with those wide receivers out there in Carolina, all very capable of having big games themselves in what's a, kind of a middling matchup. I think it's probably only one. You got to pick the right Panthers receiver. Can't really bank on more than one of them having a big game, but if you can pinpoint it, you might be able to get something out of one of those guys too.
Yeah, so let's talk really quickly about Carolina's quarterback situation. About an hour ago, Jeremy Fowler of ESPN was mentioning that we could go into this weekend without full clarity on who's going to be playing quarterback. Will Grier, PJ Walker, they both received reps in practice this week. Teddy wants to play. Jeremy calls it a steep climb with limited practice work. So I think the expectation is there is no expectation. It's a toss-up at the moment.
Well, I would suspect that's why the game total is so low. So you're going to have to take it easy on basically everybody in this game from the Carolina side if there's no Bridgewater. I mean, Will Grier is a terrible NFL quarterback. You want nothing to do with that, Yasin, outside of maybe Mike Davis.
I wish I could get quarterback money for being a terrible quarterback.
Don't we all, man?
So what's that? Look, we have a ton of questions coming in about the New Orleans Saints playing the Falcons this week. Obviously, the major question mark is, what do I do with Taysom Hill, and what is the impact potentially to Michael Thomas? So the expectation, word on the street, is Taysom Hill is getting the start. If Taysom Hill is getting the start, what does that mean for Mike Thomas? And if you're lucky enough to be playing ESPN, you might actually be able to play him in your tight end slot. Pretty lucky there if you have him. But what are we doing? We have the Saints, we have the Falcons, and you have a huge question mark with Mike Thomas and Taysom Hill. Talk to me.
Well, God bless if you're able to play Taysom Hill in your tight end spot. What a glitch in the system that would be this week, Yasin, because it's basically a sea of blue for the skill positions at the pass catching spots on that New Orleans offense in this matchup against Atlanta. On paper, it's the number one matchup for fantasy quarterbacks. Right now, we've got a 51.5 point projected game total. The Saints are 4-point favorites. It'll be interesting to see how that line moves today as we have the information coming in that it will be Taysom Hill, but it's a little bit of a funnel to the receivers and to the tight end. So all of that is good potentially for the quarterback of the Saints. That said, I think with the style of play that Taysom Hill you would expect out of him, I think it's probably fine to roll him out. It's not him I'm worried about, but it is maybe Michael Thomas that I would be worried about in this one, even though it's the number 2 matchup in all of fantasy. I would expect that Taysom Hill be kind of a guy that's opportunistic, spreads it around. I don't necessarily expect a ton of high volume passing. And Michael Thomas is kind of a big body guy that can go up and get it, but he's really a precision intermediate route runner over the field. And I just don't see Taysom Hill being the type of passer that really supports that precise style of play. So I think Michael Thomas, you got to back expectations down. I mean, probably going to be treated like a wide receiver 2 by a lot of people this week. And I think you're really going to be hoping that he gets into the end zone, Yasin. That's what you're going to really need, I would suspect.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. I am nervous about Mike Thomas. I'm still expecting to roll him out. He should be in lineups this week. He is a fantastic option. But if you have Taysom Hill passing, I mean, there's not too much to be excited about with that offense with him at the helm. So it seems like we're both worried about Mike Thomas. Let's talk about let's answer actually some questions. We have a ton of questions that came in about Taysom Hill. So I'm going to jump around a little bit and answer some of these questions. We have a QB start question. Are we starting Alex Smith, Taysom Hill, or Phillip Rivers at quarterback? Who do you have at Rosterwatch rankings?
All right, let's see. Alex Smith, Taysom Hill, and who was the last one?
Phillip Rivers.
That's going to be Taysom, I think we're going to go with Taysom Hill. It's between Alex Smith and Taysom Hill. Let's see, Alex Smith, the number 6 matchup of the week at home against Cincinnati. I think we're going to roll Taysom Hill.
Okay.
Yasin. He's not going to, we might have him a notch or so below where we had Jameis, but it's still going to put him just above Alex Smith.
So this is an interesting question from Chase. This is somebody who obviously has Taysom Hill with multiple position eligibility. Chase is asking, Taysom Hill or Cooper Kupp in the flex with Waller at tight end? Are we rolling out Kupp? We're rolling out Hill? I think the answer is Hill easily.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Let's move on. Am I forced to play Taysom Hill at quarterback, or should I roll with Derek Carr or Kirk Cousins? Well, we can take a look at your rankings.
Derek Carr is basically right in Alex Smith territory. Yeah, so Kirk Cousins is going to be very, very close with Taysom Hill and Kirk. I mean, look, we always say it, man. We want a guy that's like a running back that throws touchdown passes if we're in a bind. So, I mean, Cousins is a nice spot if you need him this week, but I think you got to go with Taysom Hill there, Yasin.
Okay. Look, I can't argue with the logic. Guys, remember, we talk about this often. We talk about this basically every week. What you do is you think through what the probabilities of certain things happening are. There is no guarantee that just because somebody's projected to outscore somebody else, that's going to happen. What we do, or what analysts do, I can't even call myself an analyst yet, but what we tend to do as rational thinkers is, what is the probability that this person is going to score X amount of points? What is the probability that this other person is going to outscore X points? And it's a percentage base. So 40% of the time, you might have the other option outperforming. That's fantasy. You got to roll with it. You just have to make a logical decision. And when it comes to emotional fill-ins like Taysom Hill this week, think about the scenario where if one of those players is going to underperform the guy that you would have otherwise started, if that's going to make you upset or annoyed and really mad at yourself, you probably shouldn't do it. You have to think about emotion management as well.
You're going to be able to live with yourself, man. You have to make decisions you can live with, and you can just go to bed and sleep well at night, man.
Yeah. So let's talk about Taysom a little more. Are we trusting him as the bye week fill-in? I think I know what you're going to say, but the options are Dalton, Rivers, Mayfield, and Smith. I think the answer is Taysom, according to you, and I would tend to agree with that.
Yeah, because I think we're going to have Dalton, and yep, it's going to be Hill.
Yeah. So, Victor, the answer here we talked about earlier, if you can put Taysom Hill in a flex spot, you put him in a flex spot instead of QB. You put a regular QB in the QB spot. On Taysom, again, are we dropping Jameis Winston for Taysom Hill? I think.
Of course.
Yeah.
I think right?
Yeah.
Jameis isn't the starter. Taysom is.
There we go. In a standard league, looking to pick up Taysom Hill, they have Dallas Goddard and Johnny Smith, and they need to drop one. Who are we dropping?
Goddard.
Okay, fair. Do we think Taysom Hill is the ultimate flex play given his QB tight end status? I'm going to stop answering Taysom Hill questions soon because I think the answer is always yes, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tremendous flex play.
So, Jacob, Daniel, the answer is yes as well. Chase, we answered your question. The answer is, of course, Taysom Hill. So let's move on.
It's like a super flex. It's like a super flex in a regular flex format, right?
Exactly it. So we talked about the Saints quite a bit. Let's talk about Atlanta. Let's talk about some of their skill players. What are we doing with the Falcons this week?
Well,
what are our expectations?
I'm a little bit worried about what Raheem Morris came out with. I believe it was earlier today. I saw it come across the Fantasy Life app on Calvin Ridley. Still sounds very, very questionable. Like he's going to be a game time decision. Man, between him and Mixon and Chris Carson, we got some nebulous injuries we're dealing with here out of some big time players down the stretch. Aside from that, though, like I said, it's a 51.5 point game total. Atlanta 4-point underdogs on the road at New Orleans. It's a very difficult matchup. It's the worst matchup of the week. I think you guys saw how New Orleans bottled up Jerick McKinnon this last week. That's the matchup that Todd Gurley is going to run into here. So it's definitely not a desirable spot to be rolling Todd Gurley out. That said, he's the kind of player, Yasin, that we've seen just being attached to this offense, has a pretty good shot at getting in the end zone every week. So I think it kind of keeps him in play there, but you're going to maybe want to tap the brakes a little on your expectations with Gurley. Most importantly, what sticks out here, I mean, it's a pretty middling matchup for Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. Obviously, you're playing Julio as, under any circumstance, but you're pretty excited about it if there's no Calvin Ridley. I guess what stands out to me here is this is a pretty good matchup for Hayden Hurst, who people don't give a lot of love to this year, the tight end for the Atlanta Falcons. It's quietly been, like a steady but unspectacular season for him. Yasin, I just think no Calvin Ridley. He's an obvious guy to pick up some extra targets in this matchup, kind of on a fast track. That's the kind of player he is. I'd watch out for Hayden Hurst being a sneaky tight end play this week.
So to summarize, if Calvin Ridley does sit out, then Hayden Hurst might actually be the beneficiary there.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a third guy, a Russell Gage, or was it Zacharias earlier in the season that comes in there. But I feel like Hayden Hurst has been kind of the steady play in that situation this year. If you look back, it was 8 targets before the bye. I mean, he's been intentionally integrated into the offense in Calvin Ridley's absence.
Yeah. Now, just to wrap up the Calvin Ridley storyline, just so everybody is on the same page about what that info was that came out on the Fantasy Life app earlier, Raheem Morris, the coach, did say that they'll continue to evaluate Calvin Ridley through Saturday before they make a decision on his availability for Sunday's game. Essentially, he's a game time decision. It sounds like they're not ready to rule him out. They're not ready to say he will absolutely play. So the smart thing to do is to have a backup in place. While we're in Atlanta, let's answer Manuel's question. Julio Jones or Deontay Johnson at PPR?
Julio Jones. Thanks for the easy question.
You're welcome. All right. So let's move on over to, do you have anything else to say about Atlanta, by the way?
No, I think that's sums it up.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the matchup of the week. We always get really great matchups sometimes. And Cincinnati and the Washington football team is one of those matchups to be excited about in regular football. But what about fantasy? Is there something to be said about this game? What is the point total from Vegas? And what do you have in terms of expectations on the fantasy world with these two teams?
Well, 46.5 point projected game total, so certainly slated to be a little bit more of a snoozer this weekend. Definitely on the lower side of the spectrum in terms of potential projected output here. And it's close to a pick 'em. We have Washington football team, 1.5 point favorites at home in this one. Really great matchups across the board for Washington. And I'll say this. I mean, it's a top 5 matchup for Alex Smith, top 5 matchup for Terry McLaurin. Actually, Logan Thomas gets a top 3 matchup, and then it's a top 12 matchup for the running back. So pretty good across the board here. And I think we've seen even the running backs really are able to benefit in the passing game here with Alex Smith, especially McKissick. So I think you can make a case that everybody's pretty viable on the Washington side. And the other case I would make here, Yasin, is that anytime Joe Burrow is involved, he passes with a lot of volume. They seem to push the pace. I know last week didn't really work out, but this is a game I might actually, I think this game could go over. I don't usually get into the business of prognosticating those type of things, but this is a game I would not be surprised if it goes over a little bit. And if that's the case, that's pretty good for everybody. So do you want to start Alex Smith? No, I think he's a decent emergency option if you have to. Clearly you're starting Gibson. Pretty sure if you need to in any PPR format, you're probably rolling out McKissick in any 12 plus team league in this situation. And then, I don't think you can go to guys like Cam Sims has been a waiver wire watch list guy for Washington. He seems to have kind of emerged as a sneaky low end wide receiver for Washington in recent weeks with Alex Smith, but obviously not many people are able to go there. Like you like to say on these trashy plays, more of a sneaky DFS play, but may be worth mentioning. And then, yeah, I mean, Logan Thomas has been a guy you can look at tight end lately. I think that continues here on the Washington side of things.
Okay. What about, we haven't really talked about McLaurin yet. What are your expectations?
Well, my expectations were pretty depressed after we lost Kyle Allen and we got Alex Smith, just because, number one, they didn't have the chemistry, and number two, just feel like Alex Smith's going to be way more of a dink and dunker. But what I think we've seen is the willingness to get McLaurin a little bit shorter depth of targets, and he's the kind of guy that can make big plays on those. So I like to see that they've made the adjustment there. I feel a lot more confident in Terry McLaurin moving forward than I did a week or so ago. If you've got Terry McLaurin, he feels like a pretty good wide receiver too this week, I think is a pretty safe way to put it.
All right. Well, that brings us down to the backfield in Cincinnati. The notorious backfield we end up talking about just about every week. We have a ton of questions coming in about Gio and what we do with him, assuming Mixon does not play. And I believe, has he even been ruled out yet? I'm not sure. Let me check quickly. I don't think he's been ruled out. We're expecting an update in about an hour on his official status. For the purposes of this, let's assume Mixon is out. Let's answer some Gio questions after you give us your weekly rundown of Gio Bernard and if he's relevant this week.
Oh, man. Well, he was barely relevant last week, Yasin, unfortunately. It was a tough matchup against the Steelers, so I don't think we had sky-high expectations, but certainly expected it to be the type of game where he'd be the primary back involved, especially in the pass receiving game. And, I mean, he did ultimately lead the backfield with 12 touches and 7 targets, so it's a little bit of what we thought, but the volume...
I'm going to pause you there for a second, only because so far we always talk... we've been talking about how he didn't really impress last week, right? I'm just going to pause you here so you can repeat what you just said. He led in snaps and targets and opportunities out of the backfield, right? And it was against a stout defense against the run. So there might be some recency bias right now with Gio, where people think this is terrible and I can't trust this guy anymore. It was a tough matchup and he was getting the looks. So if you could just repeat that point and remind us that the data, the stats are still in favor of Gio being the guy with Mixon out.
Well, he's clearly still the lead back. It's just more of a situation of how are they going to, what's the overall volume going to be for the backfield really is the situation. 68% snap count, 12 touches, 7 targets for Gio Bernard last week, 47 yards. You go down the list, it was a 25% snap count, 8 touches, 1 target for Samaje Perine, who actually churned up 55 yards. That might earn him a little bit more time there on first and second down with that kind of production on the ground. And then actually we saw Travion Williams out of A&M, 8% snap count, 5 touches. So we saw a couple of guys rear their head to make it a little bit of a running back triumvirate, shall we call it, that last week. But yeah, Gio still clearly the lead guy. I think my takeaway here, Yasin, is that Gio is more of an upside running back 3 than he is maybe like the running back 2 that we hoped he would be in Mixon's absence.
And is that different PPR versus standard?
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly 7 targets. The other guy's starting to get some run on running downs. Clearly, you would prefer Gio in PPR, at least half-point PPR. In standard, I think he's probably a lower-end RB3 with less upside. If you get into the PPR formats,
yeah,
I mean, you start him as a flex, but he's a guy who could finish as an RB1 for the week.
Let's answer some questions about Gio. Half PPR. This question comes from, is that Leaf? Reading that right? Leaf King. Half PPR. Duke Johnson, Gio. What do you got?
I think we'll go back to Duke Johnson. I mean, it's bad, but probably go back to Duke Johnson there just based on, I mean, he didn't get many more touches, but it was, I think it's a little bit of a clearer situation.
So we're unexcitedly going to Duke Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, both of those guys let you down last week, right? I mean,
start one of them.
And they're actually very similar players. So right now we have Duke Johnson at basically our number 20 running back on the week, and Gio Bernard is our number 25 running back of the week. I mean, that's what you're talking about, like low end RB2s, high end RB3s with both of those guys. Let's take a look. It's Gio Bernard, 46.5 point over under. It's a middling matchup there. Duke Johnson, it's a top 12 matchup at home, 48.5 points. I think you're rolling with Duke Johnson.
Okay, can't argue with that logic. We have a question from Iron Eddie, half PPR. Are we starting Peterson over any of these guys that we're starting? He's starting Gio, Duke, Crowder, and Jacoby Myers.
I might start Adrian Peterson over all those guys except for Jacoby Myers, and I would even consider starting him over Myers potentially.
So who are you?
If there's only one guy to sit out of that.
So my guess is, are we sitting Gio?
Probably Crowder with Joe Flacco, dude. How can you do that? By the way, Duke Johnson, a 95% snap count. I wanted to verify this. Only one target last week. I think you could chalk a lot of that up to the crappy weather in Cleveland, which has been just two total stinkers in recent weeks when they've had horrible weather with teams coming to town, warm weather teams coming to town. So, and we know Duke Johnson can catch the football. So even when you look at the underlying profile, I like Duke more than Gio. So I feel good about that answer we gave.
Cool. All right, we have a PPR question. Gio or Ahmed? First, let's answer that running back question. Then we'll answer the question about quarterbacks. This is for Brian.
Gio or Ahmed? We have Ahmed as our running back 23 and Gio as our running back 25. So I'm going to go with our rankings and go with Salvon Ahmed.
It's a pretty close one, though. So to me, that means it's a toss-up. Go with the one you're going to be less emotionally upset about if you're wrong. How about quarterback? Are we going Cam, Wentz, or Taysom Hill?
Cam. Okay.
All right, let's continue on with the Gio questions before we continue our breakdown. Half PPR question from Drew. Are we going Gio or Gurley?
Probably Gurley. Don't want to get too far out of our lane there.
Yeah, I agree. Kathy has a question for Standard League. Gio, Peterson, assuming Swift is out, which we are assuming, or Duke Johnson. You have to sit one of them.
Probably sit Gio.
Okay. See, still more Gio questions. Who scores more for the Bengals? T. Higgins or Gio Bernard? Scores more? This is an interesting question. Are we talking touchdown only?
I think who's going to have more fantasy points this week. He's picking. The thing is, everybody owns Gio right now, so there's a lot of Gio questions. Let's take a look at the matchup for Higgins there. It's going to be one of the most difficult matchups on the slate. He's tough to bench, man. I mean, I think you got to roll T. Higgins. That guy's been a stud. I don't know how you bench him. And there's enough wide receivers around on that team that I don't think that the defense can afford to focus on any one of these guys. It creates an opening even in a tough matchup, I think, for T. Higgins.
Yeah. So Miguel has a question. Wants to know if he should play Gio or Hines at flex. And then everything else is details. Sorry.
Let's see where we've got.
Yeah. All right. So Gio or Hines at flex. We can assume PPR.
Yeah, and this is a really good matchup for Nyheim Hines. Number 4 matchup, 51-point game total. We're going to give the edge to Gio in this one, though. It's just a more known situation. It's difficult to know what's going to happen with these Indianapolis running backs.
What about Gio against Mike Davis?
Mike Davis, you got to roll. I mean, it's the number 1 matchup. He's going to get the thing all to himself. Didn't really work out for either of those guys last week the way we'd hope, but I say you go back to the well with Mike Davis.
Yeah. Danny has a question. We need to pick 2 in PPR. Gio, Mike Davis, McKissick, or Duke Johnson. I think I'm sitting Gio and I don't know. And McKissick, I guess.
Yeah, I think
so
that's
I guess
the
I'm
right
rolling
call.
Mike Davis and Duke Johnson. It sounds like you would do the same.
Yes. Yep.
All right. Let's see. All right, cool. So I think that answers the majority of Geo questions. What I'd love to do right now is continue jumping around to the different matchups throughout the week. So we have Patriots against the Texans. Let's talk about Houston and New England. Two quarterbacks that have a history and a respect for each other. If you guys don't know, this is a cool story. But Cam actually met Deshaun Watson when Deshaun was still in high school, and he gave him some advice and always had a strong opinion of him. They've never matched up before, so this will be pretty cool. Looking forward to it from a storyline perspective. But Byron, why don't you break down what's going to happen with Houston and New England and what our expectations should be fantasy-wise?
Yeah, I mean, the guy that I'm pretty excited about is Damien Harris. Want to see if he can repeat the volume, if this team is willing to continue this trajectory with Damien Williams, because Yasin, this is the number 2 matchup of the week for fantasy running backs. New England on the road at Houston. It feels like a really good spot for the Patriots to try to pound away in this one. And that offensive line has looked excellent for the Patriots. So if you own Damien Harris and you're riding that wave, we know nothing is guaranteed out of that Patriots backfield historically, but I think you have to go there this week and you have to feel pretty good about it. And that'll be one of the big narratives to monitor the entire weekend. And I'll tell you, I actually think that bleeds down further down the roster. If you're in a pinch, man, all he does is score touchdowns. In this kind of matchup, I would absolutely take a look at Rex Burkhead on my waiver wire. In the number 2 matchup, he had 2 touchdowns last week. He was running ahead of James White. Think this is a Patriots team that wants to run the football. Cam Newton gives that extra dimension for defenses to have to guard, and it opens things up for guys like sneaky guys like Rex Burkhead. I actually like in this one as a deep flex play, Yasin, on the Patriots side of things.
While we're talking about the Patriots backfield, you mentioned ride the wave of Damien Harris. The wave is likely small, if history is any indicator out of New England. The wave of riding any running back wave in New England has been upsettingly disappointing in the past. Sonny Michel gave us the same hope last year. The only person that with any sort of consistency, in my opinion, that's reliable has been James White in PPR. And even he hasn't even been that consistent this year. You have Rex Burkhead, who scores 3 touchdowns or sort of gets lost. So I would just personally, I'm advising against, I would still roll out Damien Harris. I would advise against getting very excited about it because I don't think that I wouldn't expect that trend to continue or at least be stable. I would look for a more stable option. And he's actually, if you haven't gone past the trade deadline, he's a sell high candidate for me out of this week.
Absolutely. Great name to throw in. Emotion management, as you say.
That's exactly it. Jacoby Myers. This guy can throw the ball. He can catch the ball. He is he's looking good. He's also dominating target share from Cam, isn't he? Let's talk about Jacoby Myers.
Well, Jacoby Myers, it was 7 targets on a 98% snap count last week, but the previous weeks, to that were 14 targets in week 9 on a 99% snap count, 10 targets in week 8 on a 98% snap count. Shoot, I can go. Yeah, that seems to be when he really emerged as the lead guy. And all my sources that I've developed over the years that are on that Patriots beat, they all tell me to a man that he is clearly the best wide receiver on the team. It was a little bit of a head scratcher after the rookie season that he had, why they pushed him down the depth chart in training camp this year. I think he was a little bit banged up. But even we've got N'Keal Harry back, like Jacoby Myers is the guy, and this is an excellent matchup. You talk about sell highs, Yasin. I would say that Jacoby Myers is at an all-time career high in terms of his marketability and trade value. What can you get for him? I don't know, but him and Damien Harris, those are the dudes you should be going to the fantasy playoffs with a loaded bench is a real waste. Those guys are going to be rotting on your bench, good players during the playoffs. This is the time to think about consolidating your entire bench into the best starting lineup possible, relinquishing the difficult sit-start questions and just have a star-studded starting lineup down the stretch into the playoffs to relinquish the sit-starts. That's going to give you a great chance to take this whole thing down. I think Myers and Harris, you raised a good point. Two dudes to think about that with. But if you need to play them, you got to like Jacoby Myers. On the road at Houston, 48.5-point game total. Those games have been shootouts with the Texans all year. It's the number 10 matchup of the week. So, yeah, I like Jacoby Myers. I like Cam Newton a whole lot this week, Yasin, if you got to go out with him.
Yeah, look, I think New England's primed to if the first part of the season was the disappointing storyline for the Patriots, I think the latter half of the season is going to be, the Patriots are still the Patriots storyline of this year. So I'm expecting good things out of them. I don't know that they're going to make the playoffs or anything, but I think that there are some really good fantasy options there if you're really digging. Let's jump over to the other side of the ball to Houston. We haven't talked about the Texans yet. Let's talk about Deshaun Watson. Let's talk about his the people that he's throwing to. Let's talk about that backfield.
Well, Deshaun Watson really turned it on this second half of the season. Kind of predictably so. The schedule was really, really setting up for it, after a rather difficult beginning to the year. Yasin, this one's the number 24 matchup of the season. I think what's been surprising here is in recent years, New England had been just a terribly difficult team to throw the football against and for fantasy wide receivers, but this has really eased up into a middling matchup for opposing fantasy wide receivers. It's difficult for tight ends, but there's nobody on the Houston side we're really zeroed in on at the tight end spot, and it's a middling matchup for Duke Johnson. So, anytime you're playing a Belichick defense, you get a little worried that he can shut you down. I think maybe you tamp expectations down a little bit for Deshaun Watson, but if you're not going out of your way to play him in DFS this week, maybe. But in season long, like if you own him, you're going to plug along with him. It's from a matchup perspective, all the Duke Johnson stuff we've spoken about the last 10 or 15 minutes, that's supported here in a middling matchup at home, a rather high game total. I think it's fine. To me, the interesting thing to look at here, let's see who I'm assuming Will Fuller is going to draw. They have Jason McCourty on Will Fuller and J.C. Jackson on Brandon Cooks. This is over at Pro Football Focus. So if that's the case, I think you feel okay about both of those Texans wide receivers. I think it's Brandon Cooks is the sneaky guy this week. Like he's the guy that's getting a lot of targets and I think is going to get a lot of the underneath stuff. To me, he's the player to really watch out for.
Okay. I really like him in DFS lineups this week. So for whatever that's worth. All right. So we talked about Houston. We talked about New England. There's a bunch of questions coming in and we have a lot of games to still break down. So I'm going to jump back to answer as many questions as possible. We're going to do a lightning round maybe until 12 o'clock Eastern. Then we'll jump back into some reviews of the games before we answer even more questions. So the way we're going to do this is, Byron, you're going to give us one-word answers on who you think you got. Do you have all your rankings ready over at Rosterwatch, or do you need a second setup?
No, let's do it.
All right. Quarterback question, Derek Carr or Cousins?
Cousins.
Okay. Let's see. Are we starting Mike Thomas even with Taysom Hill? We answered that. Skip that. Sit one. Chark, Cooks, T. Higgins.
Well, we're definitely gonna start Cooks. So this is between Chark and Higgins. Let's see.
I'll tell you, I'm going with
Higgins. We're sitting Chark based on our rankings.
Yeah, I'm starting Higgins and Cooks as well. Would we start Jonathan Taylor over Mike Evans or Antonio Brown for the flex spot?
At your own risk, I really like the matchup. I don't think I'd start him over Brown. I might start him over Mike Evans because of the matchup. Lean towards no, but maybe over Evans.
This is a pretty good option as a flex in a 14-team PPR league. Are we flexing Deontay Johnson, Fournette, or Ballage?
Ooh, I think you got to go with Ballage. I think you have to go with Ballage. I mean, those are great options, but I like them all. I like Deontay a lot, but yeah, I think you got to go with the volume of Ballage, I'd say, in this situation.
I'm rolling out Deontay, but I like these options a lot too. I like Deontay and Ballage better than Fournette.
Yeah, I mean you can't play Fournette right now.
Yeah,
unless you have to.
So in a flex for Gabriel, Duke, Ballage, AB, or Gurley.
One of those guys.
Yep, one of them PPR.
Ballage.
Okay. Speaking of Ballage, is he a decent start this week? The answer is yes. Over guys like Jonathan Taylor, probably, or Nyheim Hines, probably. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, the guy got 23 touches last week, and they hate Joshua Kelly. I mean, Justin Jackson's still out, so I mean,
yeah.
At home against the Jets, I mean, it sets up perfectly.
Half PPR, start one. Woods, Evans, Moore, or Hunt.
Oh, so that's Woods versus Kareem Hunt. See, we got Kareem Hunt. I'm gonna go with Kareem. Kareem Hunt versus Woods. I think I go with we got Kareem Hunt as a pretty high ranked RB2 this week, so I'll go with that over a wide receiver 2.
Okay. Christopher has a question: Mike Williams or Rager? I like Mike Williams over Rager this week. What do you have?
That's so funny. I roster both those guys. I like them both. We have Mike Williams one spot behind Jalen Rager.
Oh, you got to drop off. Let me let you back in. You dropped off for a second. It sounds like you have Rager over Mike Williams by one spot. Is that right?
Yep, by a hair. Yep, based on the matchup. Right. But it's a coin flip. I like them both.
Yeah, me too. Robert Woods or McKissick this week? Assume PPR.
I don't know how you don't go McKissick in a PPR format.
Yeah, I get it. Pick 2. This is for ABJ. PPR, Chris Godwin, Justin Jefferson, or Robert Woods. I'm not smart enough to answer this one. I like all of them. Who do you got? I think I have Jefferson and Woods.
Boy, that was 15 targets for McKissick last week. Let me see. Wow. Justin Jefferson. We have him as our number 14 guy. Woods is our number 18 guy, and Godwin is 19. So we would play Woods and
Jefferson.
Same
as me. Look at that. We agree on that.
Yep.
Is John Brown droppable? Alex is asking. I mean, it depends. It depends on your format. It depends on, if it's an 18 league, then sure.
He sure has been good when he's been healthy.
Yeah.
I suppose if you're in win now mode and you can't absorb the bye, and you're also curious, whether you're even going to get him in week 12. If you do right now, you do what you have to do to win and get in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's exactly it. All right, Brant has a question: Ballage or not Mixon, but Gio? Ballage or Gio?
Ballage.
Okay, we need to start 2. Antonio Brown, Amari Cooper, Zeke, and Brandon Cooks. I'm starting Cooks and AB. Oh, that's weird. Just 2020, the answers to this question are so weird.
This is crazy.
How would you answer this?
Well, let's definitely go with Zeke. Let's get Zeke. I think it's time to start going back to Zeke in our fantasy leagues here down the stretch a little bit. And then we got AB versus Cooper versus Cooks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be Amari Cooper as we're going to give that to. You don't want to start 2 Cowboys though, right?
Yeah, no, I don't want to start.
I'm going to go with Zeke and Brandon Cooks. I'm going to make an executive decision here.
Okay. Let's go. Connor or McKissick? Assume PPR because they're asking about McKissick.
I mean, we're going to have to. You got to James. It's going to be James Conner. I just can't rank McKissick over Connor.
Yeah. All right. We have somebody asking if they're dumping Mark Andrews. Wow. Who do you got? Hurst or Mark Andrews? Rest of season.
I'm going to go with Mark Andrews because he's finally emerging from tight end hell, which has been basically the last 4 to 6 weeks of his schedule. He gets a good matchup with Tennessee this week, gets one more tough matchup next week, and then after that is pretty much wheels up for Mark Andrews rest of the season and into the fantasy playoffs. I'm going to take my chances on Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews heating things back up down the stretch, Yasin.
All right, fair enough. Julio Jones, Deontay Johnson, PPR.
Julio.
In Standard League, 2 of these options. Gurley, Justin Jefferson, Juju.
And that was in Standard.
Yeah.
So I'll go with Gurley, and then we'll pick a wide receiver, and that's actually going to surprise me. That is Juju. So we've got Juju a spot above Justin Jefferson. So Gurley and Juju.
They're all good options. I think Gurley is the one, and then it's a coin flip between the two for me personally. We already answered that question. We answered that. Will Ridley be healthy and produce against the Saints? We don't know. We're going to find out closer to game time, Philip, unfortunately. So it's going to be a little time before then. All right. Grupinder said that they plugged in Drake last second. They're off to a decent start. Half-point PPR. They need 1 running back, 1 flex. I have the options. I know you can't see them, but it's Rojo, Duke, McKissick, Rager. Half PPR. With 15 targets, I think you got to go McKissick.
Yeah, and then the other guys I'm interested in are Duke and Rager. Forget about Rojo. And so we need to pick between Duke and Rager, and we're going to pick Duke Johnson.
Cool. I think Rojo, for what it's worth, is a sell-high candidate, by the way. You have a career
deal with the Jacoby Myers of the world, the Damien Harris of the world, any of the Rams running backs, any of the Panthers wide receivers. Get those guys the hell off your teams for better players for your starting lineup down the stretch.
Yeah, that's right. Connor has a question. Pick 3 half PPR. Cup, Godwin, Moore, Chark, Justin Jefferson, McKissick. That's a lot of work you're having us do, Connor. At some point, you can manage your own team.
Let's get McKissick in, right? And then let's pick 2 of these wide receivers. And it's going to be Cup and Justin Jefferson, I think. I know it's Justin Jefferson. Let's see what. Let's see. We got Cup. Let's see. Who was the other one? It was Godwin. We got Godwin over Cup. So we're going to go McKissick, Godwin, Jefferson. That's my input.
Obviously, pay attention to the injury updates. Joshua has a more general question. Is Tua just warming up, or are we? What can we expect out of Tua in fantasy down the stretch?
Well, I mean, it's not a guarantee, but he is warming up. I think he should be rostered and stashed. I picked him up this week and put him at the bottom of my roster. I like Tua the rest of the way. I think it remains to be seen exactly what's going to happen here, but you feel good about him, and it looks good.
Cool. The fly fat guy wants to know, do we start DJ Moore or Antonio Brown this week? Full point PPR. What do your rankings at Rosterwatch say?
We are going to have DJ Moore ranked above, about 10 spots above Antonio Brown.
That's a pretty clear DJ Moore over Antonio Brown.
Yep.
All right. Let's take a look. Tight end question. Hawkinson or Cook?
Oh, Hawkinson.
Is Drew Brees droppable? Don't know.
Yeah, if you need to drop him, he is.
Yeah, okay.
He's got broken ribs, and he's out for a few weeks, the most important part of the season.
We're going to skip this kicker question for more important ones. Apologies, Kathy, but you'll be able to figure out your kicker. Okay, you know what? Now I'm going to answer it because I said you can figure out your kicker on your own. Koo or Sanders?
Well, Koo is Atlanta.
Yep.
So I like that. I can just tell you right now, I already like that. I like him in the dome on the road in that matchup. Yeah, I'd go with Koo.
Pick 2 for Dylan. Half PPR, Burkhead, Breda, Hollywood, Brown.
Burkhead and Hollywood, baby.
Okay. We already full PPR, Connor McKissick. We did just answer something very similar. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, Connor has the number 5 matchup of the week. Just there's no way to get McKissick up that high in the rankings.
Okay. Oh, man, we have a lot of questions to catch up on. I don't know that we're going to be able to break down. We'll break down the primetime games at a minimum because there's some good ones this week. But let's continue answering some of these questions. Start 1, DJ Moore, Crowder, Fulgham, Antonio Brown.
DJ Moore.
Okay. Peterson or Higgins in the flex for Zach?
Peterson.
Gibson or Balaj for Tyler? PPR. Balaj.
I want to. I know that's what it. I want to see our rankings on this one because that's a great question. So we have Balaj. Ballage.
I put my neck out there. I said Ballage. So let's see.
Honestly, I'm going to have to change these rankings live on the air. We've got Gibson ranked above Ballage, but to me, I like the volume Ballage is going to get in this game. So I'm going to make the executive decision, go Ballage right here.
Okay, fair. All right, we're in agreement on that. Woods, Anderson, Deontay Johnson, or Evans? Who are we starting? They're already starting Ridley. This is for Ray.
Pick one to start. That's going to be, it's going to be either Robert Woods or Deontay Johnson. Let's see where we got Deontay here.
I like both of them, and I think I like Deontay Johnson better.
As do our rankings. Deontay Johnson, one spot ahead of Robert Woods, our number 17 wide receiver of the week. So it's a great matchup. Let's go with Deontay.
Cool. Superflex question. Pick 2 quarterbacks, Hill, Brady, Cousins.
Hill, Brady, Cousins. You know what? I might. Boy, it feels like Brady is going to find a way to score no matter. I think you got to get Hill in, right? Got to get Hill in. You're just going to do that this week. And then I think you got to go with Tom Brady. How are you going to play Kirk Cousins over Tom Brady? You can't do it.
I don't know. When you see Jalen Ramsey on the other side, that makes you wonder.
Yeah, but I mean, there's Gronk, there's Antonio Brown, there's Godwin, there's dudes to get the ball to.
Yeah. Okay. AW has a question. Running back, PPR, Damien Harris, Ahmed, Ballage. I'm going Ballage again. Again, I'm a volume guy.
Yep. We're going to have Ballage in front of Ahmed, and we're going to have him. Where's Damien Harris?
You're going to have him in New England.
Yep. I actually got Ballage and Harris basically back to back, but with that move, I'm making Ballage over Gibson. It's going to put him in front of both those guys. So we'll go with Ballage.
Cool. All right. PPR, Anderson or Crowder? Crowder with
Anderson.
All right. Let's go. Take a look. Jonathan Taylor or Adrian Peterson? Standard league for Frank.
I like prognosticating on Taylor right now, but AP is the clear play. So this is Adrian Peterson.
Okay.
Obviously, if there's no Swift.
Yeah. And it's very unlikely there will be a Swift if anybody's just tuning in. Crowder or T. Higgins? I think we're going T. Higgins.
Higgins.
Is there any reason to hold on to Breda, DeAndre, or Pope? Should we be stashing Josh Kelly and Dynasty instead?
Yeah, I would stash Kelly instead and see if he can develop.
For Jay Lee, pick 2 running backs, Zeke, Robinson, Gibson.
Pretty sure that's going to be Zeke and Robinson. I know Robinson has a tough matchup this week because what is that? That's that Steelers matchup. We got Zeke and Robinson as our number 9 and 10 guys this week, so that's who we're going to go with.
Okay. PPR, A.J. Brown or Clyde Edwards-Helaire?
A.J. Brown.
All right. LaMichael Pirine or Adrian Peterson or Mike Evans in the flex? I can't believe this is a question in 2020.
AP.
And I can't believe AP is the answer in 2020.
Between him and Jimmy Graham, Gio Bernard, we feel like we're in the twilight zone this year, Yasin.
Yeah. Is DJ Moore worth starting if Teddy is unavailable? I think, look, I'm going to take a stab at this, then you finish up the answer with your analysis and all that. DJ Moore, even with Teddy Bridgewater starting, DJ Moore isn't guaranteed to go off. Somebody in the offense is. It's not guaranteed to be DJ Moore. So I think if he's unavailable, if Teddy's unavailable, that sort of hampers expectations all around. So in majority of scenarios, I would say probably he's startable, but I'm tempering expectations.
Yeah, I think that if we find out Teddy's not going to play, then to me, he's way more of a low end. He's more of a wide receiver 3, a middling wide receiver 3 is what I would consider him. So that could be important because that starts to bring him down to that point. You start thinking about putting the Antonio Browns of the world in over DJ Moore.
Yeah, that's right. Wentz or Brady this week for Jacob?
Let's see. We have We have Tom Brady. These questions, man, it's so funny how this works. We have Tom Brady one spot above Wentz. Tom Brady is who we're going to go with.
It means it's a good question, right?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Good job on a good question, Jacob. All right, Tanner, you need some help at wide receiver in PPR. We need to pick 3: Godwin, Antonio Brown, Cooks, Terry McLaurin, or Calvin Ridley.
McLaurin, Godwin, and Cooks.
Okay, cool. All right. Swift is out, right? The answer is most likely yes. I don't think news has come out on that officially, but I'm expecting that to be a yes. Pick 2: Zeke, Gibson, Duke Johnson. They also have Hines and AP available on waivers, it looks like, or on bench.
All right, so let's get Zeke in. So this is really, in my opinion, this is Gibson versus Duke versus AP. Let's take AP off. So Gibson versus Duke. That's going to be very, very
PPR,
close.
I'm going Duke.
Even though he only got the 1 target last week, I mean, Gibson, who's a great pass catcher, doesn't get the targets either in Washington. And I'd agree, I think it's the weather that kind of submarined the target volume for Duke last week. Yeah, I take my chances with Duke and Zeke this week.
Yeah, me too. All right, so we have a question in, let's see. Quarterback question for PPC. Cam Newton, Wentz, Carr, or Burrow?
Cam Newton.
Rager or Hunter Henry, PPR for Nathaniel.
Rager, it's time to start firing my guy up, boys. He's going to really help us down the stretch here.
All right, who's the handcuff for Henry?
Deontay Foreman for sure.
Is Devonta Adams playing this week? We don't know yet, but it seems like he probably will be. Just as an update, by the way, Jim McBride is letting us know that the Patriots have a perfect 53-man roster attendance today. No Julian Edelman, likely meaning he will not be activated for Sunday's game in Houston. I just think that adds to the Jacoby Myers storyline, just as an update. Devonta Adams, let me take a look at the app really quick.
This is getting bad for N'Keal Harry if he can't emerge when Jacoby Myers is the most notable competition on that roster.
I think it's getting scary for his future in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't yet have new info on coming out of Green Bay for their practice today. So we don't know, but Devonta Adams, he sat out, I believe, yesterday's practice. He wasn't just limited.
It's a tough matchup. I understand why this guy, he just wants to get the call. He wants this headache off his plate. Get stuck feeling like you're obligated to play a injured Devonta Adams in a horrible matchup. Is just rather not even have to make that decision.
Yeah. All right. Would you play Thomas as one of 2? Okay, let's answer this a different way for Curtis. Thomas, Ridley, Deontay, Godwin. Pick 2.
I mean, I think I'm playing Michael Thomas and Chris Godwin there.
All right. When is Kittle coming back? Probably not this year. Like what he's asking, what week is it possible?
Not in time to help your fantasy team.
Yeah, that's exactly it. All right, streamer quarterback question for Josh. Alex Smith, Kirk Cousins, or Tua?
3 pretty good options actually there. Let's see here. I think we're gonna have it as Kirk Cousins. Yep.
Okay.
We like Captain Kirk this week.
Greg is still trying to recover off of his off of Dak Prescott injury. He's looking at Mayfield and Locke as starting quarterbacks. I'm getting Taysom Hill on waivers tonight. Should I start him over Mayfield? The answer is yes.
Yep. Yes, sir.
We answered this earlier. Is Atlanta defense worth using against Hill? I'd say no.
Maybe. I mean, if you're scrounging around, I mean, I like a creative idea like that. If you can't concoct a better story for any of the other defenses on your waiver wire, then maybe so.
Yeah. Salvador wants to know Josh Allen or Rodgers rest of season. Who you got?
I would just look at the schedules. It's that close. That's it. Got to see who's got the better strength of schedule.
Okay. Do you have an opinion? Which one would you go for?
I mean, I haven't looked. I don't know. I mean, you want to say Josh Allen because Josh Allen, but Rodgers is having a hell of a season, man. I mean, I'd probably go with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. All right. Do you think James Robinson will be good to play? He's my main running back. If I remember from earlier, you said, Byron, that Rosterwatch has him as your RB9 or 10 this week. Yeah, it is a really tough matchup. It's against Pittsburgh. I'm still playing him.
Yeah, he's a tough dude, and he gets the ball. He stays involved in that game. I mean, 25 touches last week, 83% snap count. I mean, Chris Thompson with a measly 2% snap count. I mean, nobody of any Dare Ogunbowale 1 touch. I mean, this is James. Yeah, you said you're a volume guy, Yasin. Then you certainly like players like James Robinson. Just
as an FYI, though, because I know you're talking about snap count and stuff like that, but I think Chris Thompson was knocked out for the majority of the game last week.
Okay. Well, he's been knocked out for majority of the season, right?
Okay, that's fair. He's now on IR, so that's doubly true.
Real IR has been virtual IR all season.
That's correct. Are we starting Waller or Michael Thomas in flex? That's a better question than it should be.
That's a great question. Boy, it's a tough matchup on paper. I'd be interested to see. I want to see what Darren Waller did last time he played the Chiefs. Can I have 1 second to look this up?
You can. While I answer Kalen Ballage or Darrell Henderson, the answer is Ballage.
You got those Ballage ones down pat now.
That's man. Right. Look, if you asked me a week ago if I'd be saying this, I'd be laughing at myself. I just, at the end of the day, he's Ballage, but I guess he's more Bellagio than Ballage to me now. So
it's like Chris Hansen says on Red Zone, it's the witching hour when we're talking about Kalen Ballage in our fantasy season. Yep. Week 5, Darren Waller. 7 targets, 5 receptions, 48 yards, and a touchdown. So
that's a great game.
Yeah. So I think just
on Waller.
Stick with Waller, probably, right?
Crazy, man. Yeah. All right. Let's take a look. Hurst versus Goddard. I think the answer is Hurst. I think your answer is going to be Hurst. Is that right?
Yes.
Choose 3, Josh Jacobs, Miles Sanders, Aaron Jones, and Kareem Hunt. I think it's the first 3. What do you think?
Yeah, that's an awesome roster. Yes, the first 3.
Yeah. All right. Pick 3, Claypool, Fuller, Galladay, Godwin, Fulgham.
Well, Godwin for sure.
I think you have to avoid Galladay. He was non-participant yesterday.
Was he? I thought it was looking like there was a chance we were going to get Galladay back this week. I'm glad.
There's still a chance we get him back. He did not practice yesterday, though.
Okay.
And it's Friday today.
Yep. So I'll go with Godwin, Fuller, and Claypool.
Okay. Naeem Hines, Justin Jefferson, Mike Williams. PPR. Jefferson for me.
Yep, Justin Jefferson.
Okay. Let's go. All right. Quarterback question for Jay. Carson Wentz, Matthew Stafford, Alex Smith. Oh, boy.
It's going to be Wentz.
Fair. Mike Evans or Taysom Hill at flex. The answer is Taysom Hill. Hawkinson or Taysom Hill at tight end. The answer is Taysom Hill.
Cheat code.
Yep. Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, half PPR.
Jefferson
for me too. AW, we discussed McLaurin on this week. Hopefully you caught that earlier. Nicola, guys, as you can tell, we eventually get to your questions. No need to ask them multiple times. It just slows us down, to be honest. Streamer, we asked and answered. Here's a new question. RWP, half point PPR. Kupp, Boyd, Crowder, or Judy?
It's going to be between Kupp and Boyd. And we have Tyler Boyd currently ranked above Cooper Kupp. So Tyler Boyd.
I agree with that. I think it has to do with the matchup. Okay, so we have a question from Will. Who's he benching out of these guys? A.J. Brown, Mike Evans, Justin Jefferson, or T. Higgins?
I think it's Mike Evans.
Yeah. Just, again, saying you're going to bench Mike Evans in 2020.
It's
weird.
Horrible. It's painful.
Yeah. Who wins in this trade? You have Mike Thomas, Justin Jefferson, and Connor on one side. The other side, you have Josh Jacobs and Julio Jones. I think you get the first. I think the left side wins. The Connor side wins because you get 3 legit starters, and you're going into playoffs. I think you'd rather have those 3 guys. What do you think?
Yep, I'd agree.
Okay. Gio or Mike Evans? Non-PPR, so standard league.
Probably Gio.
Yeah. All right. Which Lions wide receiver? I'm not sure I understand the first question. I guess, okay, which Lions wide receiver do you like this week?
Well, if there's no Galladay, I mean, it's got to be Marvin Jones.
Yep. Duke Johnson or Balaj?
I think you and I have just decided on this show this is the Kalen Balaj edition. Of the
it really is.
Question answer. So let's roll with our boy, Kalen Balaj.
Yeah. Mateo, you're in good company. A lot of people are panicked on Thomas. I think it has to do with who else you have on your roster. All right, we answered a bunch of Gio questions earlier. So we are going to go Winston or Hill. Jameis is not playing. Is unlikely to be active in this game. So he'll be active, but he won't be playing many snaps from my understanding.
So Matt Ryan versus Taysom Hill. We go with Matt Ryan.
Yeah. All right, full PPR. We need to bench one. Who are we benching? Curtis Samuel, Mike Williams, or Chris Godwin?
Samuel.
I think I'm benching Samuel. Yeah. Oh, DFS question from Harris. Do I play Taysom Hill this week for DFS? What's your answer?
I'll be looking into that this afternoon when I'm putting our DFS tools together. My inclination is he's going to be a guy that we're going to have to be interested in. I'll be curious to see what his ownership percentage is projected to be. If he's high ownership, maybe not. But if he's sneaky, yeah.
Yeah. All right, we got to drop one. Alan Lazard or Jalen Reagor. I'm dropping Lazard.
Yes. You cannot drop Reagor right now, folks.
Peterson or Higgins in the flex for Zach?
I know you're gonna say assume PPR.
Yeah.
I'm going with Peterson.
Okay. Lazard or MVS?
It feels like you could flip a coin, really, right?
I think
a healthy guy.
We'll have a better answer for you after this week. How's that?
Yeah.
I think it's a coin flip at the moment.
Look. At this point, maybe you stash Lazard because you know what you've got out of MVS, and you know it's not going to get any better when Lazard returns. So maybe it's the allure of the unknown a little bit here with Lazard.
Yeah. All right. So, Harmony, thank you for answering so many questions. Let's see. Joanne has a question. Cooper Kupp, Will Fuller, T. Higgins? I think it's a good question. Assume PPR.
It's going to be Kupp or Fuller, and it's going to be Will Fuller for us.
Alex has a question. Mike Evans or Robert Woods in PPR? We are both going to answer 1, 2, 3. Robert Woods.
Robert Woods.
That was so on. We were really on it right there. Let's see. We answered this question. Higgins or Fuller? I think we answered a variation of this question earlier, but just the two of them against each other, who you got in PPR?
Fuller.
We answered this one as well. All right, great. So we've, I think we're just about caught up on all the questions. So I think we're going to have to stop. I think we answered just about all the questions that we have at the moment. I found one. Dallas Goddard or Janu Smith?
Janu.
Daniel Jones or Andy Dalton?
This is an interesting question because I think Andy Dalton's a forgotten guy, and if you don't if you remember, Yasin, he was like one of the number one waiver wire pickups that week. People hoping he was going to step in and kind of be able to drive that Ferrari they had rolling there early season in Dallas. So Andy Dalton is back in focus, but he is not going to be. Is he asking rest of season here? Because Daniel Jones is on a bye week, right?
Yeah, it would have to be rest of season. And yes, they are on bye.
I would look at the schedule. I feel like Daniel Jones has been heating up because of the rushing aspect. I'd probably go with Daniel Jones because he runs quite a bit.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We have half PPR. The options are James Robinson or Damien Harris or Gio. I'm going
Robinson.
James Robinson.
And he's asking for 2. So
Gio or Damien Harris.
I'd go with Harris. I'd roll Harris out again and see what happens. James Robinson and Harris.
Okay. All right, great. So we have 4 minutes before our shoes turn into pumpkins. So let's break down some of the primetime games, and hopefully we answered as many questions as possible for you guys. We answered a ton today. But let's start breaking down some of the primetime games. We have pretty good ones. We had a good one last night. We had Seattle and Arizona. We have Chiefs, Raiders. We also have Bucks, Rams. Why don't we go to Tampa Bay and the LA? Tell me about both sides of the football here, please.
Okay, well, we have let's see here. Tampa Bay, where are you, Tampa? Okay, 48-point, surprisingly pretty middling projected game total in this one. I'm assuming that it's because two defenses that have been considered fairly stout over the course of the season. The Bucks at home and a projected 48-point game total. Actually, 4-point favorites for the Bucks here at home against the Rams. It's one of the worst matchups in the league, very bottom of barrel matchups for Brady and for his wide receivers as a whole. A more difficult than average matchup for the running backs on the Tampa Bay side, and probably the best matchup that exists is for the tight ends. So Gronk has really paid off for folks the last, 4-6 weeks. I think you just keep plugging along with him there, Yasin. And then on the other side of the ball, if we want to look at the Rams, tough matchup for Goff. I think that, you don't want to ride the sugar high. Actually, it turned into more of a ground and pound for the Rams last week, but people got kind of sugar high on that number one matchup with Jared Goff last week. I think you'll want to start to let that go and walk away from that here in this one. Tough matchup for the Rams running backs, who really has devolved into a horrible, horrible situation for fantasy. You talk about guys you're trying to trade off your team, man. If I can get Darrell Henderson, Malcolm Brown off my team, consolidate them for somebody better down the stretch, I would really be interested in doing that. And then it's kind of a more difficult than average matchup for the Rams wide receivers. Also a pretty decent matchup for their tight ends. So really the best matchups in this are for the tight ends in this entire game, Yasin, and everything else is kind of like more difficult than average to very difficult. So I think the prevailing narrative will be, how do these offenses stack up against these defenses in this one? I think is going to be huge to watch. One thing that would be insightful here is let's look what Pro Football Focus has. We want to see who the matchups are.
I'm very interested in that matchup because I think we saw him basically remove DK Metcalf from the game.
Yep. So they've got Troy Hill on Chris Godwin, and Pro Football Focus has that as one of the best matchups of the week for Chris Godwin. So that, even though it's kind of a blended, difficult matchup and an aggregate for the fantasy wide receivers on the season against these Rams, this specific matchup for Godwin could actually be a good one inside the greater matchup. And then we're going to have Mike Evans, so I'm pretty sure they're going to assign Jalen Ramsey. Yep, they sure are. It's a difficult matchup, a long, physical, athletic guy who can run like Ramsey. It's just a bad matchup for players like Evans, Metcalf, players of that build. I mean, it's kind of like the kryptonite for those guys. And then Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown has a reasonable matchup on paper against a lesser-known Darius Williams. So I think you pivot away from Mike Evans where you can this week. Obviously most people are are going to have to start him in most normal leagues and probably just hope for a touchdown, which he's been pretty good at this year. But I think Godwin, and if you look at it, Godwin, even with the injured hand, has really still been the leader of that wide receiving core the last few weeks. And on the season, anytime he's been healthy, he's been Brady's go-to guy, which corroborates with everything I saw at Bucs training camp in August. So I actually feel pretty good about Chris Godwin after looking at this matchup a little bit deeper.
Good. All right, guys. So we've broken down a bunch of the games. It is 12:30. I know you have to jump, so we're going to have to let you do that. Look, we tried to answer as many questions as possible for everybody. I think we got to the majority of the questions that were answered on both Facebook and YouTube. Again, it's Yasin from the Fantasy Life app. Please subscribe to the show, like, comment, etc., etc. Thank you again to Byron of Rosterwatch. Again, guys, Byron spends time at the training camps, gets to know not just the reporters, but also the players and sees them in action, which is why they have such a good reputation across the industry for having great analysis when it comes to fantasy and everything related to fantasy football. All right, guys, thank you again for tuning in. Anything to say before we jump off, Byron?
Oh, man, I wish everybody the best of luck this week and heading into the safe and happy holiday season. We thank you all for your support.
Yeah, good luck, everybody. Take care.